What's up, OUXers? Sophia here. I'm back. It's 2025, and I am getting myself into gear. And we've got a lot of fun episodes planned for 2025. We're going to get back on a more regular schedule. I know it's been a little sporadic. We've got some other things going on, but I've got an awesome interview for you today with Torrey Podmajersky, and you probably know her name. She wrote strategic writing for UX. She has a new book coming out. She has been on the conference circuit talking about UX, content strategy, content design, UX writing. And we actually met at a conference years ago, and she became a fan of OOUX and is using OOUX in her work. And in this interview, she talks about how OOUX has helped her with sensemaking, with storytelling, the importance of storytelling. Oh my gosh, we get into so many interesting, we cover a lot of ground in this podcast, a lot. So I think that you're going to find this a very, very rich conversation. We also get into how OOUX helps you collaborate so much more smoothly and just really connect with your colleagues, making sure that it is that everybody recognizes that we're on the same team here. So we get into a lot of really great strategies for facilitation, collaboration. We talk about the documentation of OOUX, getting stakeholders on the same page, and she's got just some really awesome stories. So very, very excited to introduce you to Torrey. Few announcements. Okay, I've got an event coming up at the time of this recording. I don't have a date yet, but it's going to be sometime in mid-March. And if you sign up, you'll be able to get the recording too. But this event, I'm so excited about it. I am calling it the UX Level Up. And please do not miss this. Go to OOUX.com/UX Level Up to make sure you're registered for the event. Again, if you can't make it live, we'll get a date soon. Maybe even by the time you're listening to this, we'll have a date. But make sure you get on that list so you get the recording. It's a totally free event, and it is distilling basically the last 10 years of how I am seeing what are the most key pieces of information, key strategies, key techniques that you need to level up your UX practice so that you can have more fun, you can feel more like a badass, and you are making those connections with your colleagues and truly engaging in collaboration that actually moves a project forward instead of just talking in circles. So this is really a distilled down of, I think, my most potent pieces of advice. I'm going to call them strategies, tips and tricks. I've got 20 of them. We're going to go over 20 in not very much time. So it is a very distilled down. It is totally free. OOUX.com/UX Level Up to get registered for that. So, and more information coming soon. Okay, that's my only announcement. That's all I've got for you. I hope you're having an awesome year so far, and let's go talk to Torrey. Welcome to the Object-Oriented UX Podcast, a podcast about tackling complexity head-on, gracefully organizing massive amounts of information, and designing scalable, future-proof, and of course, naturally intuitive object-oriented user experiences. An OOUXer is a powerful blend of information architect, business analyst, facilitator, and UX strategist. If this sounds like you or what you aspire to, you are so in the right place. I'm Sophia Prater, UX designer, chief evangelist of Object-Oriented UX, and your host. Let's jump into it. Torrey Podmajersky, welcome to the OOUX podcast. It is so good to have you here. What's up? How you doing?
Yay! I am so glad to be here. And to be talking about OOUX when, we met years ago.
Yes.
Years ago at I think it was the Design and Content Conference number 5.
Yeah, Steve Fisher was around.
Yes.
He was rattling around somewhere, bringing us together. We were on a bus, I think, going to a speaker dinner.
Oh my gosh, that's right. I had forgotten about that. There was just this whole whirlwind.
Yeah.
And I met you at the event, and your voice could carry and pierce through the noise that was happening there. But then
Oh my God. That's so
the next
funny.
day you gave this amazing talk about OOUX. And I was all like, I am taking notes. I am taking
Yes.
notes right now. I'm going to be doing this. And sure enough, I did.
Wow. Okay. I
And
can't wait to hear all about it. It's so funny that you say that. So I've actually become a little less loud. I realized that my loudness is a result of my inner child wound of not feeling heard, and that I've just like overcompensated over the years of just feeling like just like that, like feeling that I think I was an only child, and my parents definitely like listened to me, but they did a lot of like the patting me on the head, like,
oh, yeah.
oh, she's so cute, look at her, oh, and not like really taking me seriously, and I wanted to be taken seriously. And I just was like surrounded by a lot of over talkers. So then I became a loud, could sometimes over talker. And so now I'm like, oh, I don't actually have to be so loud all the time. But yeah, I do have a voice that carries.
You have a beautiful voice that carries, and you can, like, here's something I've learned about having, and I had to develop my loud voice that could command a room because I was a high school teacher. So sometimes you just have to do that. So
Yeah.
it was a skill I had to learn. What I also quickly learned is that you have to say something that makes sense when you have everybody's attention like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
look at you. You had this loud talking skill, and then you created this sense making that surrounded it. I'm just gonna go with that as my own particular lens on you.
Well, there is a quote that I have from you. This is gonna be a love fest. So so actually going back to is that Hawthorne in the background?
That is Hawthorne in the background. I
Hawthorne.
cannot believe it. Yeah,
Oh,
he was
kitty.
all
We're not
here.
editing him out.
Oh,
Oh, he sounds like my cat too. Okay, so sense making, and you have a quote. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to go out of order. Whew. People are biased towards stories they understand. Oh, you said that it's so like, of course, right? But I've actually never heard anybody say that. Tell me more, like, where did that really click for you? Or just tell us more of what do you mean by people are biased towards stories they understand?
yeah. So here is, I just mentioned being a high school teacher, so maybe that is where it comes from. I'm going to go with that.
Yeah.
When I was a new teacher, I was finishing my physics degree. And one of the sets of courses I took was about physics education. And in physics education, by the physics education group at the University of Washington, um, they had this amazing method called physics by inquiry, where they would structure experiences that students would have and then ask pertinent questions along the way. So students were creating their own data grounded, experience grounded internal image of what was happening. And this is to
Mm.
understand things like electricity and magnetism, or how the moon and the earth collaborate around the sun to
Yeah.
create the phases of the moon.
I mean,
Like,
magnets, how do they work?
right? Like,
No
how
one
do they
knows.
work? See, here's the thing. People do, but most physics education is surrounded by, like, do these equations. That explains everything. And most people don't think that way. So it doesn't work particularly well. But this
Hmm.
method of giving people experiences and structuring the sequence of those experiences and the things they'd have to think about in order to answer the questions and figure out what's going on now. Well, how would you test that idea and do the next part? So that sequencing of ideas is all about creating stories that we understand so that we could be biased toward them.
Hmm.
Because let me take a step back. This was found to be necessary by this physics education group because students would go through rigorous education about things and come out of it and 6 months later be tested on the core topics. And this is, in the standard teaching method of, like, here's some equations and do a lab that we tell you exactly what to do, that sort of thing. 6 months later, they would come out of it and go, oh yeah, this common misconception is exactly what happened, because they are biased toward their previous understanding,
Mhm.
because that was based on a story they understood. So how do we make
Yeah.
stories that people understand? So this is a super
And it
long
stuck with
answer.
them. It stuck with
Right,
them, right? That's the
right,
most amazing thing is 6 months later, like they still had it somehow like in their bones. They had that
right.
story and
So
we're evolved to do that. Like,
that's the difference that it makes to have an
mm,
experience that actually, like, you make up stories, kids make up stories all the time about, oh, this, I did this and then this thing happened because a reason I just invented.
mhm, mhm.
Right? So those are the stories we grow up, we build, we construct our universe around stories that we create or that other people create for us, other explanations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those can be pretty crappy explanations.
Right.
So we want to create better ones. So that's my long, really nerdy pedagogy about how people need to experience things and have a coherent story
Mhm.
for how these things belong together.
So, I mean, also just like thinking about just the story that we were kind of reminiscing about how we met, which we have scraps of memories, but like,
Right.
where do we remember where, right? Like, we
Hmm.
remember where we like there was a bus. We were all on a bus,
Yeah.
right? I think you were even sitting next to Sarah.
Sarah Walker Betcher?
No, other
No,
Sarah,
Sarah. Wait.
other content design Sarah. She wrote content design. What's her name?
Yes, Sarah.
Oh God, we'll have to splice
Right
it
on
in.
my, right on my
I know. I'm
shelf.
like, their book is right there. And okay, Sarah, if you're listening, we're sorry we don't remember your last name. I'm like, if
Sarah
it was
Winters.
Sarah
Sarah
Winters,
Winters.
I
That
think
was
you were,
not even her last name at the
I'm
time.
pretty sure you were sitting next to Sarah Winters.
Pretty
Or
sure.
maybe another Sarah. But like we remember the things. Wait, we
Yes.
remember like where we were. Steve
Yep.
Fisher was there. We kind of like constellate these things to kind of piece the story together. And I recently learned a very sad but interesting fact about some Native American tribes. Their stories were connected to the landscape. So
Yeah.
how they would remember the stories was basically on like the mountain ridges, and it was very similar what oh gosh, the the Greek guy that started thinking about the memory palace, right? And how we remember stuff
Yeah.
based on placement. Native Americans were doing the same thing. So when they were displaced, they actually lost a lot of their stories too, because
Yes.
it was so connected to the landscape and where we are and the things and how we kind of visualize these things. So, and stories is just, it's how we learn. And the other thought that I had when like what jumped into my head when you said, when I read in your, actually was in your slides from your button talk, which we're going to loop back around to your button talk for sure, is people are biased toward the stories they understand. When I read that, I was like thinking about Hollywood these days and
Oh
how many
yeah.
like new movies, the stories just don't make sense. It's like, what are the writers doing? Like these stories do not make sense. Like literally, like when there's massive plots, like this is why the Star Wars franchise I think isn't doing very well because the stories don't make sense anymore. If you think about like the originals, like we all know the plot of the
Yeah.
first three Star Wars because they made sense. They
Right. And
weren't
their
dumbed
stories we've
down.
rehearsed over and over again. Yeah.
Yes, they're classic stories, but it was unique in its own way. And when we read a story and it can be complex, it can be robust, it can be, but if it makes sense to us, then we will love it more, actually.
Yes. We'll
We
love it
don't
more and we will trust it more.
mm,
We'll have more confidence that it will do what we need it to do. And really, a UX in its most basic sense is just a story that we're participating in,
mhm.
sometimes over and over again.
Yeah.
Maybe not its most basic sense. Maybe that's a pretty abstract sense, but
And I think what we as OUXers in particular do is embrace it's kind of like a choose your own adventure story where
mhm,
it's like the stories are not always that linear. And Hollywood is, it's a linear story, right? If you're writing a novel or something, but user experiences, every individual is going to have their story on how they use the experience. But when we get really stuck in our journey maps or our task flows and kind of these linear things, like maybe some little branches and edge cases, we kind of miss the point on how somebody might want to choose their own adventure
Hmm.
and move through content, move through objects, and like create their own story that makes sense.
Yeah. And even when we look at it in that way and, break it down to the objects, we see so many more possibilities, right? Then like the product owner came to us with like, hey, we're going to build a thing that does a thing or that uses a technology. What can we build with that?
Yeah. It's a tool for innovation for sure.
It is.
Okay, so let's back up. So I have to give a big shout out to Gladys D, who you may have met at the Button Conference. She was at your talk and
Yeah,
absolutely loved your
yeah.
talk. She was in cohort 10 and got certified in cohort 10 with her OUX certification, and she was like, "You got to talk to Torrey. Like, bring her on the podcast." So I was like, "Oh yeah, oh my gosh, Torrey, we met years ago," and like I was taking notes on your talk as well, and like. I think that we had a nice cosmic connection when we met years ago.
Yeah.
And so I was like really excited to bring you back on. And she managed to grab the slides. I don't have the recording of the talk, but maybe we can remedy that somehow, or maybe get you to do the. We'll talk. We'll talk offline. Because just looking at the slides, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to hear this talk. So you rocked that button talk, and you were talking about how OOUX is helping you in your process and helping you with sense making and storytelling and terminology. And I just don't even know where to start. But let's start with the Finch app, because I actually have
Oh, sure.
some tangential questions to that. So my neighbor and friend, shout out to Mia, loves that app, and she actually was showing it to me a couple months ago. And I was in the process last year of untracking because I had like all
Hmm.
my tracking of habits had like
It
there
can
were like
take over your
layers
life.
and
Yeah.
layers of crust, and I was like, I gotta like stop tracking everything, like
Yep.
not tracking steps, not tracking journaling. So I was like, I don't think I can. So Finch is a habit tracker, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's
Do
a
you use it?
reminder or a habit tracker, and sometimes just a self-care. Like it has a whole bunch of self-care functions.
Okay.
I do use it, and I use it for things I need to remember to do, especially things I'm already likely to remember to do, because then I get points. Because I go
Mhm.
in there and I check it off, and I love getting points. I am
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, like, oh, right, I need to put the garbage out today. So I just have those reminders on
Ah,
schedules there, right?
okay. Okay.
Um,
So
and it
overall, it
has
sounds like you love the app, right?
I love the app.
Okay.
Several friends of mine also use it, and we can send each other little, like, it's called Good Vibes.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's just, send a high five to Jeremy. Great.
Yeah. And did you
Um,
describe it as a good vibe and object?
a good vibe is totally an object.
Totally an
And
object.
it's an
Okay.
object, well, it's an object type because there's many different good vibes within that
Okay.
all have their own iconography and stuff, and then different phrase. Like if I get a good vibe that is a high five from a friend of mine, then there's a few different things that their burb will tell me in the app. Like we're getting deep into it now, but like
Okay.
all of those different chunks are objects or attributes of objects that like here this they need maybe five different phrases that they might say per kind of good vibe. And there's, I don't know, maybe 20 kinds of good vibe.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
they've created a whole world, and a lot
Yes.
of their objects, they kind of invented these objects. There's Tree Town, there's rainbow stones. So we'll see how much we actually get into like what is a rainbow stone. I do kind of want to know. But you were using this, so you were a user of the app, and you decided to use it as kind of like a vehicle to do some storytelling, actually about
Right.
storytelling
Yep.
at the Button Conference. So what kind of like you were finding some serious OOUX fails or areas where like the clarity wasn't as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
So one of them I want to point you to, because this is something that I never heard of, is homophones. Tell me
Hmm.
about homophones and how that can create like some cognitive dissonance or cognitive load.
Yeah. So homophones is any two words or set of words that are spelled differently, usually, but sound the same,
Mm-hmm.
and have different meanings and grammatical purposes. Like one is the word to.
Mm, oh,
Am I using it as a preposition or as a number or to mean also?
Mm-hmm.
Like, ah, it is, or
Right.
is it a part of a verb? Like, to means an awful lot of things.
Yes.
So when I'm using, and actually, it's not a great example for talking about OUX things. Um,
Well, the example you gave, I'll give you your example because
yeah,
I just
great.
looked at it, was journal and journey.
Oh, yeah. So
And
journal and journey sound similar enough that when somebody is just like, many people think in words, some people
mhm,
do not. Some people think in words that they visualize. Some people think in words and hear the sound of it in their brain. That
mhm,
last category is probably the most common way that people think when they think with words, which is like 90% of us, 90% of the
okay.
time. So if you have words that sound similar, even if they're not exactly the same, for concepts that you're still learning the difference
Mhm.
between, it's really easy to screw them up or to be like, oh, right, not journal, but journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Right.
it's very similar to like when icons look really, really
Oh
similar, you
gosh.
know,
Yeah.
and you like always click on the wrong icon because you're like, oh, like the upload versus the share
Hmm.
icon. It's literally a box with an arrow, but it's a box with an arrow pointed up versus a box with an arrow pointed slightly to the right, you know? So it's that same idea, which I've never talked about in OOUX. We talk about synonyms a lot.
Hmm.
Like I think you gave the example of journey versus adventure, right?
Right.
And
Good
that so those
God.
are synonyms, but like, or those are no, those are actually synonyms that mean two different things. And
Right.
then somewhere else, it's like feeling versus mood. So
And those are using two different words for the same thing.
yes,
Gah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it's shape shifting, and what we would call in OUX parlance, shape shifting
Hmm.
language or shape shifting labels, where you have two different labels for the same thing, or Matt. Yes, yes. It's you don't want to have two different words for the same thing or the same words for two different things. Yes,
Right.
totally. But the two words that sound the same, we've never talked about that. I think that's such a good distinction. And I
Hmm.
wonder how many times I've done that in my work where because I love alliteration. And so how many
Oh,
times am I
yeah.
like, oh, it's cute. It's cute if they like are almost the
Yeah.
same, but they're
Or
different.
words that look the same. And even if they sound different, like
Mm.
file and find,
Oh,
putting
yep.
those two in a menu next to each other
Mm-hmm.
is miserable for your users,
Yeah.
especially anybody with dyslexia, blurred vision, or just a little bit tipsy. They're going
Yeah.
to choose the wrong one.
Yeah, exactly. Test everything a little bit tipsy. This is like if you don't have a user, just have it. That's take that advice or leave it. But really, I mean, yeah, you want to remember. Like we think, like, oh my gosh, are people's heads really going to explode if you use the term journal and journey? No. But then if you're also using journey and adventure, and you're
Mhm.
also putting file and find next to each other, and all these little things add up to where sometimes they're just clicking on the wrong thing, and then other times they're clicking on the wrong thing, and they're like, no, 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 not that. And it just creates this friction.
Yeah.
How does this come back to storytelling?
It does. So in my talk that you're talking about at Button, it was about terminology. So Finch gave me lots of good places to talk about how the terminology could be better for all kinds of reasons. And terminology is frequently something that content designers like me are asked, hey, what do you think about our terminology? Do you think,
Mm-hmm.
should we clean that up? Great. Um, but the process of working on the terminology can turn people off, right? Like if what you come up with is a
Oh,
big
okay.
spreadsheet, and then you hold a meeting to lead people through the spreadsheet of
Mm-hmm.
all of the things you just did, then you're asking people to have a meeting about a spreadsheet.
Gross.
Gross.
Oh.
So you need to tell the story that includes why this is important, the difference you expect it to make, and where all of these different changes that you want to make fit in. Because
Mm-hmm.
not only is it difficult to have, journal and journey and adventure and file and find all in the same experience, it's really difficult to get the product team, and sometimes that's the larger cross-feature product team, all aligned that these are all things worth fixing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to get them all aligned that they should do this work, that you're trying to make as easy for them as possible, you've found these problems, you need to tell them that story, bring them along on that journey of, hey, here, and the method that I recommended in that talk was to tell them the story of the user coming to the app, what the app does for them, and really this focuses on the objects. Who are
Mm-hmm.
the users? What are they, what are the objects they are interacting with? What are the functions that they want to do with those objects? All those sorts of things. And be able to give them the right names in that, or show them, here's a problematic name. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, here's a difficult part in this story. Yeah, we're all understanding right now what a difficult part that is. So couching it in this storytelling way helps bias people toward the outcomes that you're looking for as a content designer working on terminology.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the story of the app, right?
Hmm.
Which has characters in it, which are users and objects, right?
Yeah,
Burbs and
it
pets and best friends and tree towns and rainbow stones, right? There's all these
yeah,
like
all
characters
these
and
names.
magical objects and things that can do things and that users can do to them. And we need to tell the story. Do you ever do like, okay, do you ever do like, here is the current story that we're telling,
Hmm.
and look how confusing it is. Like,
Yes.
there's a, okay, yeah. So actually showing like we use 6 different words for this thing while
Hmm.
we're trying to tell this story. And then we talk, and then over here, it's like sometimes a best friend, sometimes a pet, but then like the pets have pets, and those are called burbs. And right? Like, so
Yeah,
so you actually do. You show like this is the story we're telling right now. This is the current state of our
yeah.
story. Like, can we make this a little bit more succinct and clear?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
it works not only for this terminology sense where you're saying, and usually I'll try to stitch that all into one story, like, here's the story and we're all on board. And oh, here's a disappointing moment in the story for our users. And then keep going, but we're still in the story. Let's just, oh, and this is really confusing. Which way should we go with this?
Mm.
And then keep going, but tell them Al as one story while I have everybody's attention. And
Mm-hmm.
I illustrate it with pictures from the app or sometimes found images that are just like, here's how it feels right now, or this is the object. And having a picture of that object is really powerful to tell that
Mm-hmm.
story. But I'll also use that when it's just, hey, our UX that we either have in process or we've just tested for the first time and validation says, right?
Yeah.
And say, let's break this down with the objects to tell the story of what it is right now and to imagine better stories that we could
Yes.
tell.
So I've done this before with system models where I'll
Hmm.
show the current system model, and I've given this advice like in my master class. Like sometimes you literally want to show what a bowl of spaghetti we're trying to give
Yes,
people. And then
yes,
here's like a cleaned up system model. Like if we combine these objects and rename these objects and move these, like look how beautiful this special snowflake gorgeous system model this becomes. So literally it's like the untangled knot. Like
yeah.
here's your knot and here's your untangled knot. But I love this as a story too. Like
Hmm.
showing like here's like the really freaking confusing story that people aren't going to understand. So they're not going to be biased to it. They're not going to fall in love with it because it's going to make them feel a little stupid. And
Yeah.
here's how we can make this same exact story actually so much more clear. Like it reminds me, I read a book recently and I don't remember the name of it, but there was characters, and sometimes the characters they would give the first name. Sometimes they would be called by their last name, and sometimes they would be called by a number.
Ay, ay, ay.
And I literally I had to make a code in the back of the book on like this person is like 1812 or something like that. They were like
Hmm.
called by like the year they were from. It was time travel. And it was really confusing. Or it's like a book like where there's like 3 Annas or something. Like in some
Yeah.
historical
It's really
fiction will
confusing.
have that. It's really,
Yeah.
really confusing when you have like three names or the same person is like sometimes called other. And sometimes with fiction, it's all right. You can do it, but like this is not what we want with user experience design. So these
No.
are not the type of stories we want to tell. We just want to be super consistent with our labeling of the stuff. What's up, OUXers? There's something very important that I have neglected to do in the first 50 episodes of this podcast, and that is to implore you, dear listener, for a review. So here I am, asking ever so nicely for you to drop a rating and review of the OUX podcast into either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This can really help us spread the OUX love. So if you've gotten any value from OUX and the Orca process, which I'm assuming you have since you're here, I'd be so appreciative for a few minutes of your time. Okay, so how to do this? Don't actually go click on the rating metadata because that would be way too intuitive. On Apple Podcasts, go to the podcast detail page, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see some big stars down there that you can add stars. And then underneath that, there is another little link that says create a review. So that would be amazing. And on Spotify, you've got to do this on the mobile. On Spotify mobile, go to the 3-dot menu on that detail page and hit rate. And actually on Spotify, even on an episode detail, you can leave a comment there too. If you scroll down the episode detail, there'll be something that says something like, how did you like this episode? And feel free to put your thoughts there. Thank you so much and happy OUXing.
You know, I would love to tell you another story that you don't have pictures of, away from the Finch app,
Yeah.
about using OUX at a company, let's call Schmoogle.
Schmoogle. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at a company named perhaps Schmoogle, there was a big, bold bet made at the senior VP level that a new product would be offered because there was this market opportunity that they perceived in their great wisdom.
Okay.
And they said, this won't be hard for us to build because it combines features and functions from multiple different existing products that we have. And we will call it this thing, and they perhaps, hypothetically, might have announced the product before any of the engineers or even had done even a proof of concept that these functions could work together, or how they would work together, or what it would do for users. So I was hired into this group as a response to what happened here.
Okay.
And one of the things I found quickly was that every single person I talked to who belonged to these existing products that were now supposed to be working together to pull some of their features into the same new product that's already been announced.
Okay.
So, and kind of a nightmare scenario. Hopefully nobody listening will ever face something like this.
They, like, half of them are right now. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
I think
right?
this will resonate. Unfortunately.
So everybody I talked to had a different image of what the overall product was and where their part fit into it, and who the user would be, and what would be important to that user about both their product and their part of it and the whole new product. So the bowl of spaghetti, I literally created a diagram that showed arrows from one thing to another and just started being like, do I even have all of your pieces here? And let everybody feel frustrated with me while I was still in that honeymoon spot of, oh, I'm just new here. I'm just trying to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And I went to my UX manager and to product owners and said, how about I used this new technique called OOUX. Literally, I kid you not.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, what was that? What would that be like? This a few years ago. It was not as well known at all. And I said, well, we would get the stakeholders from these groups in a room and we would identify what are all of the pieces that we need to be structured around. And we're just going to go through what does it take to set this up in the way it's envisioned by the senior VP folks. What does it take to set it up at a new client who has bought into this?
Okay.
And what are all of the different pieces? And then I had this idea we would also get into what are the functions and then how would we use it. And it turned out that the entire 2 days of workshop that I had planned for that, all we got through was identifying objects
Yeah.
and some interrelationships.
Yeah. And even like, is this an object, or is this object the same object as that object? Or these two
Absolutely.
objects different? Oh, or this object, you have totally different ideas on what this object is. Like
And
those kind of conversations.
those kinds of conversations, because we also had to start with, why is that guy in the room? Because they didn't even know all of the different pieces with it. So I used it as a tool to be like, okay, everybody, let's all get in the same room. Here's the overall promise. And let's just map it through. And I projected, and I think we used Figma and just said, okay, here's squares. Here's all the things. Oh, we have to sort of fork it here for different, okay, we can do a thing.
Okay.
And we just put a bunch of objects in a row.
Yeah.
And we determined some of the interrelationships. And then we took notes on how they were related and all of that. Sent most of the stakeholders home, and another UXer. Anyway, we got together
Some
in
of
a
the
much smaller.
stakeholders got locked in the basement.
Yes,
some of them didn't get to go home.
We locked 4 of us in a basement and said,
Yeah.
including the technical writer who was a gem for this, because
Okay,
she
yeah.
knew where all of the bodies were buried for all of these products.
Of course, yeah.
And said, okay, let's draw a picture that contains or references or at least categorizes all of these objects so that all of the objects can be identified, like we can point to places in a diagram where all of these objects live in a way that can make sense. And so that if we went through them in order, whatever that means, that it would make sense, like it would be a diagram that would come through this and make sense that we could tell a story about. So we did. And we, working together and iterating, we were able not only to make a picture of much improved on my initial spaghetti of like, what the heck is even going on here? But we were able to say, in the future, when this is a more baked reality than it is now, it should look like this beautiful thing.
Right.
And right now, it looks like this much less beautiful thing, which is why, and which clearly illustrated the pain points that all of these different engineering teams were having. So, because we used OOUX, we had a basis that everybody agreed on that we could build this from and make sense of what was going on.
I'll just repeat that. We had a basis that everybody could agree on.
Yes.
Right.
And
And like a glossary
so
too. Like when we
Yes.
know what these words mean and we're all on the same page with what these mean, and we can use them
Yep.
in a way to tell stories and to
Yep.
get into the complexity of it. And that's amazing. And sometimes these conversations do take 2 days just to get the words right. But then
Yeah.
to have that foundation, that shared mental model among all the stakeholders,
Yeah.
that it may have been like, how long? Weeks, months of just spinning their wheels,
It had
talking
already-
over each
yeah.
other and crossing their wires. I mean, like, why not take 2 days just to get your language right? And
Yes.
figure out what are the things that people are actually coming here for, that actually matter to the user. What are the characters in the story that we're trying to build for people, to choose your own adventure that
Yep.
people are going to get to play in? What are those things? What are those things on that playground, to mix metaphors?
Absolutely. And what it did for me and for the immediate UX team was give us and for the technical writing team, which it really unblocked them. but it gave us like, here's our diagram that probably needs some help. But because we had just had this contentious room full of important people being mad at each other, and we could come back to them in person with like, hey, can I show you a thing? Tell me where I'm wrong in this diagram. And they made very small changes, felt like they were listened to, and then championed that to their bosses and said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I think you need to see this diagram. It really helps explain the product in a new
Yeah.
way,
Well,
which was amazing.
amazing. And as a professional, like to like have a little bit of a meta moment here, like as a professional coming in and being the new person and getting to like quote unquote like play dumb a little bit and be like, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to understand things. And like even though like really nobody understands things, but you get to be that person, which is great, like as a consultant coming in and being like,
Mm-hmm.
we're just like, just help me get on the same page, right?
Yes.
But everybody
Yeah.
else is getting on the same page too. And then you move through that, and maybe there's some contentious conversations, but some of those conversations are probably so juicy where the unknown unknowns come out, and like any like the high risk assumptions too, where it's like, oh my God, like you
Yeah.
were assuming that, and we're trying to build this product. Like that's not what I was thinking. And to
Right.
be able to be the catalyst as a facilitator
Mm-hmm.
for that, like how'd that feel?
That felt great. And it felt really powerful in that, not like king of the sandhill gonna stomp around and destroy everything way, but in that sort of holding all the reins and having all that responsibility, but also with all of your work documented essentially, so that if you needed to go backward and be like, I think we're getting something wrong, let's check this, and doing it collaboratively, which the
Mm-hmm.
process really enables beautifully, to even be able then to drop a note into the original Figma that the entire team used, comment somebody in and say, hey, when you brought this up, what did you mean?
Yeah.
And do you have 15 minutes we could talk about it?
Mm, the
Right?
beauty of that.
To be able to ask for the support you need as you're working through the hard problems, because you've already gotten everybody on board
Yeah.
to some extent.
You just hit on like the three things that I feel like when people start using OUX, they go through one of my programs, and that's just like, these are the, I guess, the results, right? The things that they feel like, oh my gosh, this is what it helps me do. And it's one, like being able to process through all the complexity. Like, just like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a really complicated thing. We're merging like, I don't know, X amount of products together. And the people that have decided this like didn't really quite think it through. And now it's in my lap, and like, holy effing shit. Like, I've got to figure this out now. And it's really overwhelming. So this is a tool to like, like this can actually be a little fun. Like, because
Yeah.
you kept saying pieces. So shout out to Andrea Newhoff. She's like my favorite OUX metaphor, which is it feels like getting all the puzzle pieces
Oh,
on the
yeah.
table and right side up. And that you
Yes.
know that you have all the puzzle pieces and everybody has the same idea of what the puzzle pieces are, right? So you're all working on the same puzzle. Like, it's not like it's like easy. Like, the puzzle can still be, it's going to be difficult and challenging, but way more fun,
Mm-hmm.
difficult challenge than like if half, you're like, I don't even know if I have all the puzzle pieces. And like half of them were like chewed on by the dog. And like, does this puzzle piece even belong here? So like that feeling of like, yes, I've got this. I can get all of my puzzle pieces here and right side up. And I kind of have an idea of the picture that I'm trying to build. And then the other thing is the collaboration. You brought that up of like at the end, like when I started my career, like I wanted to feel valued on a
Mm-hmm.
team. Like I was doing good work, and I wanted to like have work friends and like work on cool things with other people and feel like we were like jamming together and like writing on the whiteboard and sticky notes. And instead it was like, I'm by myself on my computer, or I'm like in a meeting where we're talking in circles where everybody's like half staring at their
Right.
computer, and it like just wasn't fun. And so this is this way that we can all kind of come together and like really have fun with the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you like, what would you say, like, how does collaboration, when you're like collaborating around some sort of OUX artifact or like thinking about the objects, thinking about that language through this lens, how has it changed how you collaborate, or like what would you add to that as far as collaboration? especially cross-functional collaboration or collaborating
Yeah.
with stakeholders.
I think it really, so there are many ways being a content designer that having everybody can write. Sometimes it really sucks that everybody can use all of the words and everybody thinks that they can use all of the words in all of the best ways. Um, and sometimes you have to be like, no, 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 we need to not have a paragraph on the page in this UX at this moment, right? Like sometimes that sucks. Where it doesn't suck is where you have this low, low barrier to entry, where either you're in person and you've got sticky notes, which is super fun, or more frequently now I'm on in Figma or in Miro, collaborating online with people over a online call. And it is once people are using the tool, they go, "Oh, I can just make as many of these as I want." And you're not any better at making stickies than I am. I can just make stickies all day long.
Right.
Once they're over that hump, right? Like everybody has to sort of get started doing the thing. Doing an icebreaker really helps, but then it levels the playing field. The engineers are good at it. The product owners are good at it. The UXers are good at it. The lawyers are good at it. The
Yeah.
support personnel are good at it. The
The
all of the
people from the
people are
parking department are great at it.
right. It
I've
is,
experienced, you can bring everybody together in 10 minutes of training. You're all speaking the same, or 15 minutes maybe of
yeah,
training. You're all speaking the same language.
yes. And like it, people can learn to respect each other's point of view in a different way.
Ooh, ooh, say
And
more.
that's, well, I have noticed in some rooms at some companies that when this particular person who everybody knows is the principal engineer, when they say something, everybody else kind of shuts up,
Mm,
especially if they have reason to disagree with him. And it's
mm-hmm.
usually a him.
Okay.
When it's about getting stickies on a board, and this is a facilitation thing that we can do
Mm-hmm.
too, where it's, hey, I'm not going to ask you to defend everything you put up there or discuss what you put up there immediately. Your job is to prepare and what is your answers to this? And then we're going to
Mm.
sequence them, we're going to put them in an order, we're going to do that sort of thing. It levels that playing field so that people can see each other's ideas and respond to those ideas instead of responding to that human and their status.
Yes, so good on leveling the playing field. Just because not only this the same language, but it's like we're all players in this game here,
Yeah.
and we're all just players. Do you have any advice for facilitation to make sure that playing field is level when maybe there is one person in the room that's sucking more air than everybody else, or you see somebody that you're like that they're just a little bit more shy?
Yeah, I have a deep toolkit for this because as a high school teacher, all of those dynamics existed in every high school classroom.
Right.
So sometimes it's cajoling the person who hasn't spoken up. Sometimes it's saying, we're going to go around the room, or I'm going to call on people in an order that I just made up.
Yeah. Setting expectations is really great to even say, like, this is what, like, instead of just starting to call on people, be like, all right. And for my next
Yes,
trick, I'm going to call on people.
exactly.
Okay.
And being so, if you are the facilitator, you have this really important role as host where you're making everybody feel comfortable, or making them feel uncomfortable enough to participate, depending on the person and the situation.
Mm-hmm.
You're setting the timing, you're setting the pacing. You frequently are setting the emotional temperature.
Ooh,
So if
yeah.
somebody gets out of control and is like banging the table about something, or is just celebrating really loudly in their outside voice, and you're in a very small room, you get to like think about how to be the polite antidote to that
Mm,
and
yeah.
say, great, thank you for that. I'm gonna wear your plugs next time. And thanks so much for your enthusiasm, and let's keep going.
Let's keep going. Yeah, when it comes to the emotional temperature, this OUX work can be tough, right? You said like you
Yeah,
spent 2 days just trying to get to the words, the things,
Yeah.
right? Which in my experience, sometimes it feels like, well, actually my experience with teaching other OOUXers, some OOUXers worry that like when they're doing it for the first time, like they're doing it wrong because it's
Yeah.
hard, right? It's like you're uncovering all this complexity. And I'm like, this is a feature, not a bug. Like
Yeah.
when all these open questions are coming up, you're literally taking them from the future. Like these questions are going to come up at some point,
Yeah.
but you're getting underneath the rug early on, which is so great. But it can be for a facilitator, when you have that trough, right, which happens in almost every single, Torrey's nodding, the trough where like it's just going to happen, where you're like, it's 4 p.m. on day 2 of a 3-day workshop. And it's like, you're more confused. Everybody's more confused than when we started. Everybody's like, what are we even doing here? This isn't working. Like when that energy really starts going low and people feel like it's not working, I'm so confused. Why are we even doing this? This is so hard.
What do you do then?
Tips and
Yeah.
tricks.
Yeah. I had this happen recently in a group, and I just said, okay, we are going to go on a walk. And we were in physical space. And I said, we're going to put down what we're doing. We're going to, finish that last sentence, do that thing, put down what we're doing, and literally see different things. And while we're doing this, I want us to be thinking about this central question, which is what we're all working on, but thinking about it just in the back of our brain. And, tell the back of your brain that we trust them very much. And we're just gonna come back to that, and it will be fine. Because getting that energy back and getting it, but maintaining the togetherness is critical. Frequently, a mistake I see people make, and sometimes it's not a mistake, but when people are at sort of loggerheads and people are all engaged but not making any progress, there can be a real temptation to say, okay, let's take a break. Everybody go away. We'll come back in 10 minutes and try again. Somehow maintaining, and it's really hard when it's virtual, somehow maintaining that we're all in this together still is really critical. So we can make a break like, okay, we are going to take a break, and I don't want to lose the thread of what we're doing. So let's have everybody go get a beverage, and when they come back, I'm going to ask you to explain how that beverage connects to the problem as you see it. Right?
Ooh, okay. Just to
And
get
then
thinking out of the box.
thinking out of the box, but also gives you a tool when you bring people back together and say, okay, what beverage did you get, Joe? And how does that connect to the problem as you see it? Chances are Joe is going to say, it doesn't connect, but let me tell you the problem as I see it, which is fine,
Yeah.
which is just fine.
You still get to where you're trying to go.
You still get to where you're trying to go, which is to bring everybody back to those central problems.
Yeah.
If people were interested in more facilitation tips and tricks, go to teaching school. That was facetious. I'm holding up like one finger. Go to teaching school.
Yeah.
Second, more realistic scenario is go get a book called The Art of Gathering.
That's been on my list.
That should be not on your list. That should be just in your hip pocket.
Yes.
It is astounding because it is
God, it's
all
just got
about
jumped to the top.
it is all about the philosophy of gathering people and putting that into practice at a structural level, so that in the moment you really feel empowered to say like, oh, here's these tools I can use because I understand the purpose of where we're going. And even if Joe doesn't tell us how the drink relates to the thing, I don't care. I have a mechanism to tie where we were to where we're going.
Oh, I love that. And this is something I've been doing in my personal life. Another shout out to Jake Z, who does this started doing this with his family, is setting expectations. So what I have is like, what is the structure? How is this going to play out? And one thing that I've done in OOUX workshops is I just tell them there's probably going to be a trough.
Yes.
Like there's going to be a moment where we're all going to feel like this doesn't make sense at all. And just letting people know so that when it happens, it's like, We're good.
Yep.
And I love yours. It's like, and when that happens, I might like, we're going to go on a walk or something. We
Yeah.
might have to do that 3 times this week. Just like go on a walk, look at the trees, have a
Hmm.
cup of a nice tea or something like that, and bring it back. So I love that. And I also love that, like, this is actually really related to a piece of content I was creating earlier today, where you were talking about like just put it in the back of your brain and just trust that it's going to marinate back there.
Hmm.
So I was working on a project during cohort 10, a demo project, and like I had a lot of bonuses in cohort 10. I totally overextended myself and I didn't finish my own project. I didn't do my own homework. So now I'm dusting it off 2.5 months later to like fulfill my promise and like finish my demo project.
Hmm.
And one, it turned out to be a feature and not a bug because I came back 2.5 months later with
Hmm.
fresh eyes and new thinking because it had been kind of just sitting in the back of my head. And the other thing you mentioned that I wanted to bring back up was the documentation piece of it. The workshop is the documentation. As you're
Hmm.
doing the work, you are building the documentation. So I had like, I mean, I've heard people say this, that OOUX artifacts are great onboarding tools. They're also great re-onboarding tools. Like if you
Yes.
have to step away for 2 weeks, which happens, somebody goes on maternity leave, you get pulled another project for 2.5 months, and then you get put back on the project. You can open up your object map, your object guide, your CTA matrix, and be like, oh, yeah, I can spend like 45 minutes with this and I remember exactly where I was at. And I have all my questions documented. And all my little comments are actually attached to this particular piece of metadata that we were thinking about the taxonomy on. So I love that you mentioned that about like having that documentation there
Yeah.
that's almost like just gets created naturally through the process.
Yeah. It's, and very unlike a lot of affinity mapping projects. Like there's an awful lot of workshop things that don't leave you with artifacts that you can make sense of at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that people walk into the room and they're like, "What have you been doing? It looks colorful, I
It looks
guess."
colorful. And OUX also looks very colorful
Also
too.
looks very colorful,
Also looks very
but
colorful.
you can, if you use the recommended colors, then all you need is pretty much one blog post and you can figure out what's going on in
Yes.
any OOUX diagram, which is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. And the other piece that I just want to echo that you said is just helping people remember that we're all in this together.
Yes.
And that brings like the gay, like I use the gay metaphor a lot of like, it's us against the puzzle, right? Like it's not us against each other. It's one of those
Right.
collaborative games where like the enemy, so there has to be an enemy, is the problem, right?
Yeah.
We're all working the problem together. And just reminding people of that because it really can feel like in so many organizations that it's like us against them or this department's goals versus this department's goals. And OUX can bring us together, one big happy family,
Absolutely.
working the
Absolutely.
problem. Torrey, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned so much. We'll be staying in touch. We're not gonna like not talk for another 6 years or something or however long it was. And I just want to keep roping you into the OUX community and learning from you. Meanwhile, you've got some books coming out. You've got your new agency. Like, tell us about Catbird and the books you have coming out.
Yeah, thank you. So, Catbird Content is a small agency where I work with companies to do training and systemic work and even content design so that they get more content better. Actually, no, sometimes less content better
Yeah.
and more effective to meet their business goals and to upskill their employees in how to create this critical part of almost every UX everywhere, the words.
Hmm.
So that
And
is,
And who are your clients? Who are like the best clients for anybody listening who might be
yeah,
working at a company like that? What kind of companies do you love to work with?
I honestly, I love to work with uh, startups who have uh, problems attracting the right attention from either their potential customers or their potential investors who need to
Mm,
work on how are we talking about our product and what's the storytelling we can do about that. I
okay.
also love talking to mid-sized companies who are at the point of like, okay, we have some UXers, but there's all these problems and they keep telling us the words are broken and they can't fix them all. And I say, great, I can help you with that. And then there's enterprise clients who are saying, Wait, we should have made the content part of our design system a long time ago. How can you help us with that? So
Wonderful.
those are sort of my sweet spots with them. And then I offer mentoring and workshops also. So I'm a
Oh
little
my
busy with
goodness.
that. And then
Yes.
the two books I'm working on a second edition of Strategic Writing for UX that I think one of my first conferences talking about the first edition was where we met.
Ah,
Yeah, so full
wow.
circle.
Yeah.
So the
What's
second edition,
what's changing with the second edition?
so so there's three example apps in it where it talks about principles and how those principles play out in very different apps from each other. There's a whole new example app that deals with enterprise UX content, which I know is what an awful lot of people are working with these days. And there's a whole brand new chapter on building AI features and
Mm-hmm.
what it takes from a content perspective to do that well and usefully. So
Amazing. Okay, so
super fun.
updated examples plus AI woven in there.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
big
exciting.
changes. And then the new book is going to be very new and it will come out probably next January. So we're still quite a ways away from it. But I am connecting UX skills to the business impacts they make in sort of an index form where there's a big index of business impacts you can make, like increasing adoption or reducing support costs or lowering the carbon footprint. Many different, I think there's 30 different impacts we're tracking now. And then connecting those like an index to the UX skills that are most likely to help you make that impact. And
Mm-hmm.
then each skill is linked to the variety of different impacts that it makes. And I am
Awesome.
doing this coming out of some content design skill work that I did, and then I invited two excellent people to co-author it with me, and that is also coming out with O'Reilly.
That sounds like a big deal.
It's a huge
I'm
deal.
It's a big deal. That's amazing. To end, what is there a business case for OOUX?
Oh, there's several. There's a business case for sense making.
Right. And
So
OOUX is
the
the tool for
Yeah,
that.
so the impact that you would get from it are like productivity impacts, like getting your entire team aligned, being able
Mm-hmm.
to communicate it well, deciding on the right strategy to use there, making it incredibly usable.
Right. Yeah,
So
the
it's
usability
an
for
enabler.
sure.
Hmm.
The one that I keep going back to is reduced rework. Like just
Oh gosh,
because
yeah,
of those questions that you get to be asking and that you're making sure you're bringing those questions in the future. Asking a question late in the game when you're in production or you're in Figma, like that's could be an expensive question to ask. It's
yeah,
much cheaper to ask that question early on.
way cheaper to get that right sooner.
Yeah, amazing. All right, where else can people find you? Where do you want people to connect with you?
Best place is catbirdcontent.com or on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Amazing. Thank you so much, Torrey. It was amazing having you here. I learned so much, and I know the audience did too. All our OUXers listening, I know they got a lot out of it. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me, Sophia.
Thank you so much for listening. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. Please visit objectorientux.com/podcast for show notes. Our soundtrack is Fighter by Ruby Vell, courtesy of Sugaroo Records. Happy OUXing!